11 p.m., 6 months in European hotels, and I'm finally home. The leather seats of my Tesla smell like victory as I pull into the circular driveway of my $2.8 million mansion. Then my blood runs cold, every light blazing, strange cars parked like they own the place, mail scattered across my marble steps. I slide my key into the front door. The alarm system's been changed. Footsteps on the marble staircase above. A woman's voice shrieking, "Who's breaking into my house?" Down comes this woman in a designer bathrobe, blonde hair perfect, manicured nails, clutching a phone like a weapon. "Get out! I'm calling 911 right now!" "Ma'am, this is my house. Officer, there's a dangerous intruder in my home. Send police immediately." Here's what this HOA Karen didn't know. My security cameras had been recording her criminal trespassing for 2 solid weeks, and I was about to make her pay for every single day. What would you do if you found some stranger living in your mansion? Drop A if you've survived entitled neighbors, and tell me where you're watching from. Let me back up and explain how a successful tech entrepreneur ended up starring in a home invasion nightmare that would make reality TV producers offer 7-figure contracts. My name's Sterling Blackwell, and 3 years ago I bought this mansion in Willowbrook Estates as both an investment and a middle finger to everyone who said a kid from trailer parks couldn't make it. 8,500 square feet of pure luxury, marble floors that echo footsteps like a cathedral announcing your arrival, hand-stitched leather that smells like success, and granite countertops so pristine they could perform surgery. I'm what polite people call a workaholic and honest people call obsessed. Built my software company from a garage startup where I survived on ramen noodles and caffeine to a multi-million-dollar enterprise that makes other tech bros weep with inadequacy. My recent divorce was amicable. No kids, just 2 ambitious people who realized we made better business partners than bedmates. The mansion became my fortress of solitude, complete with a security system that would impress paranoid dictators. Motion sensors, cameras in every room, cloud backup storage, and enough digital monitoring to track a fruit fly's migration patterns. After growing up poor, I wasn't taking chances with losing what I'd built. 6 months ago, I left for Europe to establish our international offices. Professional preparation, naturally, notified the HOA board in writing, arranged weekly lawn service that cost more than most people's rent, set up mail forwarding, and activated vacation monitoring mode on my security system. The kind of meticulous planning that separates successful people from those who blame bad luck for their problems. But I hadn't anticipated Priscilla Worthington, a woman who could weaponize community spirit like other people weaponize nuclear materials. Picture every HOA horror story you've encountered, then add the personality of someone who thinks public service means the public serving her personal ambitions. Priscilla's 52, drives a white Mercedes SUV that's never encountered honest mud, and speaks with that manufactured refined accent people adopt when they want their neighbors to forget they grew up in mobile homes. She's married to Harold, a spineless accountant whose backbone disappeared sometime during their wedding vows. Priscilla fills the maternal void in their childless existence with an obsessive need to control every aspect of our 200-home community. The woman could discover building violations in heaven itself and demand architectural improvements. Willowbrook Estates attracts the kind of people who measure success in square footage and property values. New money tech workers, established professionals, and retirees who want their million-dollar investments protected by people who understand that appearance matters more than authenticity in American suburbs. Here's where Priscilla's scheme revealed genuine criminal sophistication. She didn't stumble onto my empty mansion and think free upgrade. She researched property law, identified legal loopholes, and developed a systematic plan that would have impressed organized crime families. While I was negotiating contracts in London and Berlin, Priscilla was conducting reconnaissance. She convinced the HOA board that abandoned properties needed community oversight to prevent deterioration and protect neighborhood values. She discovered an obscure clause about vacant property management that gave HOA officials broad authority during owner absence. The narrative she constructed was artistic in its manipulation. "Poor Sterling," she'd whisper with practiced sympathy, couldn't handle the emotional trauma of divorce and was clearly having a mental breakdown. The mansion was too much responsibility for someone obviously struggling with personal issues. She presented herself as the concerned neighbor volunteering to monitor the situation and prevent community property value damage until I recovered my emotional stability. Priscilla started with legitimate-seeming property checks, then gradually escalated to moving personal items in for extended monitoring periods. Changing the locks became security enhancement. Redirecting mail became responsible property management. Living in my house became comprehensive caretaking services. By the time I returned early from my European expansion, Priscilla had convinced the Postal Service, utility companies, and half the neighborhood that she was my authorized property manager handling affairs during my personal crisis. The police who responded to her 911 call saw an expensive gated community, a well-dressed woman with official-looking documentation, and some jet-lagged guy with a suspicious European tan claiming ownership of a mansion. That night, sitting in a luxury hotel while watching my own house through security cameras I'd forgotten to mention, I realized this wasn't random opportunity crime. This was professional-level property theft disguised as community service. Priscilla Worthington had made one critical error. She'd chosen to rob someone who built his fortune by outthinking problems that destroyed other people. The woman who thought she could steal my mansion was about to discover why underestimating tech entrepreneurs is a career-limiting mistake. The next morning brought my first real taste of how professionally Priscilla had weaponized suburban entitlement, and trust me, it was more sophisticated than most Fortune 500 corporate takeovers. I'd spent the night in the Ritz-Carlton, which normally would have been luxurious but felt like expensive exile when I could literally see my own mansion from the hotel window. The morning coffee tasted like liquid frustration while I planned my counterattack against someone who'd apparently earned a PhD in criminal real estate with honors in advanced audacity. At 9 a.m. sharp, I returned to my house armed with a locksmith, my property deed, and enough legal documentation to satisfy a paranoid federal tax auditor. The scene that greeted me would have been comedy gold if it weren't costing me thousands per day. Priscilla answered my own front door wearing a silk robe that cost more than most people's monthly salary, sipping my $30 per pound coffee from one of my handcrafted Italian mugs. The sheer audacity was so breathtaking it deserved its own reality TV show called Criminals Say the Darndest Things. "Mr. Blackwell," she announced with a condescending tone reserved for addressing confused children or politicians, "I'm afraid there's been a significant misunderstanding. I possess comprehensive legal documentation authorizing my residence here." She produced a leather portfolio thick enough to stop small-caliber bullets, containing what appeared to be a legitimate house-sitting agreement complete with my signature, official corporate letterhead, and enough legal jargon to impress a Supreme Court justice. The documents looked so authentic they could have fooled forensic accountants having vision problems. "This is completely forged," I said, examining papers that had obviously been created by someone with access to professional document production services. "I'm certain you're experiencing confusion following your emotional difficulties," Priscilla replied with synthetic sympathy that could have substituted for artificial sweetener in a diabetes clinic. "Prestige Property Management Services handled all arrangements while you were receiving treatment in those European facilities." Treatment in European facilities. She'd transformed my business expansion into a mental health crisis narrative that would have impressed Hollywood's psychological thriller writers. But here's where Priscilla committed her first strategic blunder. She claimed I'd contracted her through Prestige Property Management Services, a company that sounded impressively official but existed nowhere except in her criminal imagination and these fabricated documents. The smell of her expensive perfume couldn't mask the stench of desperation as I pulled out my phone for some real-time fact-checking. Knowledge nugget. Document forgery can be exposed through paper analysis, ink dating, digital metadata examination, and simple business verification searches. Always independently verify any property management agreements through multiple sources before accepting their legitimacy. I dialed my attorney, Harvey Goldstein, activating speaker mode so everyone could participate in this educational legal experience. "Sterling, great to hear from you," Harvey's reassuring voice filled the marble foyer like the sound of approaching cavalry. How's the European expansion progressing? Fantastic results, Harvey. Quick legal question. Did you arrange any property management services during my absence? Property management? Sterling, you explicitly instructed me that absolutely no one should access the property except emergency services. We never discussed any management arrangements whatsoever. Priscilla's confident expression developed structural cracks like a building experiencing seismic activity. The mini twist that demolished her entire facade occurred when I politely requested that Priscilla contact this property management company to verify our arrangement. She fumbled through increasingly creative excuses about them being temporarily unavailable for client verification, while I conducted a live Google search for prestige property management services. 0 results. No website, no business registration, no phone listings, no reviews, no social media presence. The company existed exclusively in Priscilla's criminal enterprise and whatever document forgery operation she'd commissioned. Ma'am, I said with the infinite patience of someone explaining quantum physics to a particularly dense rock, this company doesn't exist anywhere except in your imagination. Well, they must operate as a very exclusive, discreet service, Priscilla replied, apparently deciding to double down on criminal stupidity like it was a proven investment strategy. Meanwhile, my locksmith was earning every penny of his substantial fee by examining the security upgrades that had been installed on my own property. His professional assessment? These are premium security locks, probably cost $1,000 installed. Someone invested serious money in keeping people out of this place. $1,000 of my money, spent by someone illegally occupying my house to prevent me from accessing my own property. The irony was so profound it could have been studied by philosophy graduate students. But the revelation that transformed annoyance into righteous fury came when I discovered my mailbox had been systematically violated. 2 weeks of mail, carefully sorted, opened, and organized like some kind of identity theft filing system. Bills paid using expertly forged checks. Insurance policies fraudulently updated with Priscilla's information as authorized resident. Even my magazine subscriptions redirected to her name. This wasn't opportunistic property squatting. This was organized identity theft with luxury real estate benefits. Priscilla, I said, employing the tone I used for explaining complex software architecture to investors who thought computers were powered by hamster wheels, you've committed mail fraud, identity theft, check fraud, criminal trespass, and document forgery. These are federal crimes carrying serious prison sentences. I'm protecting community property values, she shrieked, her refined accent evaporating to reveal something that sounded suspiciously like rural Alabama trailer park origins. You abandoned this place. Someone had to assume responsibility. That afternoon, while Priscilla barricaded herself in my mansion like some kind of suburban warlord, I sat in my rental car reviewing security footage that would make federal prosecutors cancel their vacation plans from sheer excitement. 2 weeks of high-definition video evidence documenting Priscilla's systematic criminal invasion, changing locks, forging documents, stealing mail, and gradually moving in like some kind of real estate parasite. Every federal crime meticulously recorded in courtroom-quality digital evidence. I called Harvey with an update that would transform this property dispute into legal warfare. Harvey, clear your calendar. We're about to turn real estate law into a full-contact sport. Mal. Priscilla's next tactical maneuver proved she wasn't just some delusional suburban squatter. She was a professional con artist with media manipulation skills that would have made political spin doctors and carnival fortune tellers weep with professional envy. While I was coordinating with Harvey to file enough criminal charges to keep federal prosecutors busy until retirement, Priscilla was orchestrating her transformation from property thief into community saint through what could only be described as a PhD-level masterclass in public relations warfare. The woman had apparently studied crisis management at the same school that teaches politicians how to blame their scandals on weather patterns. At 3 p.m. sharp, Channel 7 News descended upon my mansion with cameras, microphones, and the kind of manufactured urgency that television producers use to transform mundane neighborhood disputes into ratings cocaine. I observed from my rental car, which smelled like leather disappointment and expensive frustration, as Priscilla emerged from my house wearing one of my custom Italian bathrobes like it was couture Fashion Week attire. "This transcends property disputes," she announced to the eager reporter with the moral conviction of someone announcing the discovery of world peace. "This is about protecting hardworking families from wealthy individuals who abandon their community responsibilities and leave properties to deteriorate, devastating everyone's life savings." She'd somehow convinced this news crew that I was the neighborhood villain, a privileged tech mogul who'd emotionally abandoned my mansion after my divorce and left it to become a community blight and security nightmare. Her heroic solution? Selflessly volunteering as a concerned neighbor to provide responsible stewardship until I stabilized my personal situation. The manipulative brilliance was absolutely infuriating. She'd repositioned herself as the victim of my reckless wealth and emotional instability, while painting me as an unstable rich boy who couldn't handle basic adult responsibilities like property maintenance and community engagement. But here's where I discovered the true sophistication of this criminal enterprise. The news segment featured interviews with several neighbors who enthusiastically endorsed Priscilla's community protection initiative. People I'd barely met were speaking with expert authority about my alleged obvious psychological breakdown and well-known financial difficulties that apparently everyone could observe except me. Mrs. Henderson from the Tudor mansion. Poor Sterling clearly couldn't cope with his divorce trauma. The entire neighborhood has been concerned about that property becoming a foreclosure situation. Chen from the Contemporary Fortress. Priscilla's intervention has been absolutely providential, preventing what could have become a devastating blow to our property values. These people were describing a fictional narrative that existed exclusively in Priscilla's criminal imagination, yet they delivered testimonials with the credibility of eyewitnesses to historical events. Knowledge nugget. Sophisticated media manipulation campaigns frequently employ coordinated false testimonials from supposedly independent community members who have been coached or compensated. Always investigate whether apparent grassroots community support represents genuine opinion or organized deception. That's when I launched my counteroffensive with the precision of someone who'd survived decades of corporate warfare and hostile takeover attempts. I contacted Channel 7's news director and demanded an immediate opportunity to provide documented clarification regarding the actual property ownership situation. 30 minutes later, I was positioned in front of my own mansion armed with property deeds, banking records, travel documentation, and sufficient legal evidence to convince skeptical federal judges. The reporter who'd been so sympathetically amplifying Priscilla's community protection propaganda suddenly displayed the expression of someone realizing she'd been interviewing a master criminal. "Mr. Blackwell, can you definitively prove your ownership of this property?" I presented my official deed, recorded with county authorities 3 years prior. Bank statements documenting mortgage payments current and consistently paid, property tax records displaying my name and social security identification, international travel documents proving my legitimate European business expansion. "Ma'am, I can irrefutably prove I own this mansion, I can verify I've been conducting legitimate business internationally, and I can demonstrate that woman has been criminally occupying my property for 14 consecutive days." The mini-twist that obliterated Priscilla's entire media strategy materialized when I activated my smartphone and displayed security footage showing her systematically relocating furniture into my house, professionally changing security locks, and methodically intercepting postal deliveries. "This isn't community protection," I announced, observing the reporter's expression transform from professional skepticism to genuine horror. "This is systematic criminal trespass, federal mail fraud, and organized identity theft documented in high-definition video evidence." But Priscilla wasn't surrendering her theatrical performance without attempting one final desperate scene. When confronted with undeniable video proof of her criminal activities, she escalated with the panic of someone whose elaborate deception was disintegrating in real-time television. "Those surveillance cameras were installed illegally without community notification," she shrieked, apparently forgetting she was still being broadcast live to thousands of viewers. "Sterling's been conducting unauthorized neighborhood surveillance. I'm actually the victim of his stalking behavior. The reporter, suddenly comprehending she'd been manipulated into amplifying criminal propaganda, posed the question that would haunt Priscilla's eventual legal defense. Ma'am, if your residence here was legitimate house sitting, why didn't you immediately contact Mr. Blackwell when he returned home yesterday evening? The silence extended longer than a congressional ethics investigation while Priscilla's cognitive processes apparently experienced complete system failure. Her eventual response demonstrated reasoning skills that would challenge remedial logic courses. He was supposed to call ahead for appointments. You can't just arrive at someone's residence unannounced like some kind of intruder. Someone's residence. She just confessed on live television that she considered my mansion to be her personal property. That evening, Channel 7 broadcast a dramatically different narrative than Priscilla had orchestrated. Instead of community hero protects neighborhood investment, viewers saw a local woman accused of elaborate mansion theft scheme. Her criminal activities played on continuous loop while legal experts explained the serious federal charges awaiting her. By midnight, my phone was vibrating with apologetic calls from neighbors who'd suddenly always suspected something suspicious about Priscilla's story. Remarkable how community opinion transforms when people realize they've been endorsing organized crime. Harvey's late-night update felt like champagne and victory cigars. Sterling, the district attorney, watched tonight's broadcast. Criminal charges are being filed at 9 a.m. sharp. Priscilla's response to being exposed on live television was to launch into victim theater so spectacular it would have earned Tony Awards if criminal fraud were considered legitimate performance art. Within 6 hours of the news broadcast, she'd somehow materialized what appeared to be a grassroots support movement complete with professionally printed signs reading "Justice for Priscilla" and "Stop Corporate Bullying of Vulnerable Women." The organizational speed suggested either supernatural community mobilization abilities or access to rent-a-crowd services that specialize in manufactured moral outrage. I woke up in my ridiculously expensive hotel suite to discover my own mansion surrounded by protesters chanting about housing discrimination and wealthy oppression of disadvantaged widows. The irony was so profound it could have been studied by graduate philosophy students. A millionaire criminal being defended as a victim of economic inequality while literally stealing someone's house. But Priscilla's true masterstroke was hiring Pinnacle Crisis Management, a firm that specialized in transforming convicted felons into sympathetic martyrs through strategic narrative manipulation that would have impressed Soviet propaganda ministers. By noon, she was conducting interviews portraying herself as a displaced widow who'd been selflessly helping a mentally unstable neighbor, only to be viciously attacked by unlimited corporate legal resources. The morning air, which should have smelled like expensive landscaping and suburban success, now reeked of protest markers, manufactured victimhood, and the particular tension that develops when professional manipulation encounters amateur community activism. Sterling Blackwell epitomizes everything destructive about wealth inequality in modern America, Priscilla announced to a sympathetic lifestyle blogger who apparently specialized in David versus Goliath narratives where David was secretly running organized crime operations. He's weaponizing privilege to systematically destroy vulnerable community members who dare question his absolute authority. She'd filed a $2.1 million civil lawsuit claiming wrongful eviction, intentional infliction of emotional distress, abuse of legal process, and discriminatory targeting of economically disadvantaged citizens. The legal documentation was professionally crafted and strategically designed to position me as a wealthy sociopath using expensive attorneys to destroy helpless widows for entertainment. This woman had turned criminal trespassing into a social justice campaign with production values that would have impressed Broadway musical directors. Knowledge nugget: strategic lawsuits against public participation, slap suits, are designed to intimidate victims through expensive legal procedures rather than achieve legitimate judicial outcomes. Many states have robust anti-slap statutes allowing quick dismissal and automatic recovery of legal fees for victims. That's when I realized Priscilla had committed her most catastrophic tactical error. She'd declared legal war against someone who'd survived 20 years in an industry where corporate litigation was considered recreational sport and hostile takeovers were weekend hobbies. My counteroffensive involved deploying resources that most property theft victims simply couldn't imagine accessing. I retained Victoria Sterling, the attorney whose reputation for obliterating white-collar criminals had become legendary in federal courthouse folklore. If Priscilla wanted to perform victim theater, she was about to encounter someone who specialized in exposing professional victims with surgical precision. Simultaneously, I engaged Marcus Chen, a forensic accountant whose expertise in financial fraud detection had been featured in FBI training seminars and whose client list read like a directory of federal prosecutors' greatest hits. If this represented sophisticated criminal enterprise, I needed someone who could trace money laundering schemes that would impress international banking investigators. The mini-twist that exposed the true scope of Priscilla's criminal empire occurred when Marcus's background investigation revealed this wasn't her debut performance. A comprehensive financial analysis uncovered a systematic pattern of identical schemes across 4 states spanning 6 years of professional property theft. Sterling, Marcus reported with the enthusiasm of someone discovering King Tut's tomb filled with evidence, she's executed this exact operation at least 5 times previously. Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico. Identical methodology, identical victim narratives, identical outcomes. She systematically targets wealthy property owners during extended travel periods and exploits legal complexity to steal properties worth millions. The revelation transformed my perspective from furious homeowner to federal crime victim. Priscilla wasn't some delusional suburban neighbor having a psychological episode. She was a career criminal who'd perfected property theft techniques and converted victimization into award-worthy performance art. Victoria's legal strategy demonstrated why she'd never lost a property fraud case. Instead of defensively responding to Priscilla's victim mythology, we launched aggressive offense with evidence that would make federal prosecutors voluntarily work overtime from pure professional excitement. "We're not merely defending a property dispute," Victoria explained with the confidence of someone who'd systematically destroyed criminal enterprises before morning coffee. "We're documenting an organized fraud conspiracy that's been systematically victimizing wealthy Americans for over half a decade. Our nuclear weapon was the security footage. 2 weeks of crystal-clear video documenting Priscilla methodically committing federal crimes while simultaneously planning her victim defense strategy. Every criminal act meticulously recorded in evidence that would survive federal appeals and Supreme Court scrutiny. But our strategic masterstroke was uncovering Priscilla's digital communications, which revealed coordination with a network of accomplices specializing in establishing false victim narratives. Text messages discussing high-value target properties, email chains orchestrating community sympathy campaigns, and financial records documenting payments to crisis management firms and professional protest organizations. By week's end, Priscilla's grassroots movement had evaporated faster than desert water in Death Valley summer. Professional protesters vanished when they discovered they'd been supporting federal criminal enterprise. The sympathetic blogger issued retractions after learning about Priscilla's multi-state fraud history. Even Pinnacle Crisis Management terminated their contract to avoid association with organized crime investigations. The woman who'd attempted stealing my mansion through victim performance art was about to discover that some theatrical productions involve federal criminal liability that can't be resolved through improved acting techniques. Harvey's Call delivered news that would transform this into the most expensive amateur dramatic production in federal legal history. Sterling, FBI financial crimes investigators want comprehensive interviews tomorrow. Priscilla's case has triggered a multi-state federal investigation into organized property fraud enterprises. What began as someone stealing my house had become evidence in federal prosecution of interstate criminal conspiracy. Priscilla had targeted the wrong tech entrepreneur, and she was about to learn why underestimating people with unlimited legal resources and systematic documentation habits represents a career-terminating mistake. The FBI interview the next morning delivered revelations that transformed my mansion theft case into what Agent Sarah Martinez described as the Rosetta Stone for cracking the most sophisticated property fraud network in American history. Sitting in the federal building's sterile conference room that reeked of government coffee and impending justice, I watched Agent Martinez methodically arrange files that resembled evidence from international conspiracy investigations. Photographs, financial flow charts, property documents, and a map of the United States riddled with red pins representing something exponentially more sinister than one delusional neighbor stealing my house. Mr. Blackwell, Agent Martinez announced with the gravity of someone revealing classified intelligence, your case represents the breakthrough we've needed for 8 years. Priscilla Worthington operates as regional coordinator for what we've designated the Prestige Property Syndicate, a criminal enterprise that's systematically stolen over 50 high-value properties worth approximately $23 million. The scope was so breathtaking it deserved its own oxygen supply. The FBI had been tracking systematic property thefts disguised as community activism, but they'd never encountered a victim with sufficient resources and documentation obsession to build comprehensive federal prosecution. My paranoid security system, compulsive legal documentation, and unlimited forensic accounting had accidentally provided the missing puzzle pieces they desperately needed. Their methodology demonstrates criminal sophistication that would impress organized crime families, Agent Martinez explained, indicating a timeline that made my stress levels achieve orbital velocity. They research affluent property owners with documented extended travel patterns. They identify high-value properties in communities with manipulatable HOA governance structures. They establish false narratives about owners experiencing psychological breakdowns or financial instability. Then they systematically acquire properties through legal manipulation and coordinated community pressure campaigns. The beauty was diabolical in its simplicity. They'd weaponized American suburban community spirit against successful Americans, transforming neighborly concern into systematic theft through manufactured crisis narratives. Technical knowledge nugget: sophisticated property fraud enterprises exploit jurisdictional gaps between state and federal law enforcement while using property law complexity to delay prosecution until stolen assets can be liquidated. Federal RICO statutes enable prosecution of entire criminal organizations rather than individual property crimes. Marcus Chen's forensic analysis had exposed a network involving dozens of specialized accomplices: corrupt property management firms, professional document forgery services, crisis management consultants, compromised legal professionals, and even coordinated media manipulation specialists. The operation's sophistication rivaled international money laundering organizations. Your mansion represents victim number 51, Agent Martinez continued, but you're the first target with sufficient resources to fight back effectively against professional criminals operating with unlimited fraud proceeds. Most victims accept settlements rather than endure years of expensive litigation designed to exhaust their financial and emotional resources. And the personal targeting revelation felt like discovering I'd been living in someone else's crosshairs for months. They hadn't randomly selected my property. They'd systematically researched my international business expansion, travel schedules, and financial capabilities. My entrepreneurial success had transformed me into premium prey for criminals who'd converted property theft into sophisticated criminal enterprise. They monitor business publications, social media activity, and public travel records to identify optimal targets, Agent Martinez detailed. Wealthy individuals with documented extended absence plans, minimal local family support systems, and properties located in communities with corruptible governance structures. But here's what transformed my fury into moral obligation: the victim demographics. 50 other successful Americans who dedicated their careers to achieving financial security, only to have their life's work stolen by criminals who exploited their achievements as targeting criteria. Physicians, attorneys, entrepreneurs, military veterans, people whose success had been weaponized against them by systematic predators. The exquisite irony, Agent Martinez observed with the satisfaction of someone who'd invested years building this investigation, is that Priscilla's organization specifically selected you because your wealth and resources made you an attractive target. However, those identical advantages provide exactly what we need to obliterate their entire criminal network. My obsessive security documentation, comprehensive legal records, and unlimited financial resources had inadvertently constructed the perfect federal prosecution. Every crime meticulously captured, every transaction preserved, every communication archived in evidence that would survive Supreme Court scrutiny. Mr. Blackwell, would you commit to serving as primary witness in federal RICO prosecution designed to permanently dismantle this criminal enterprise and protect future victims? The decision required less consideration than selecting breakfast cereal. These criminals had transformed my professional success into their victim selection criteria, violating not merely my property but my fundamental sense of security and community trust. Agent Martinez, let's destroy these people's criminal careers and ensure they never target another successful American. What began as someone stealing my house was evolving into federal prosecution that would safeguard every entrepreneurial American from systematic property theft, masquerading as community protection. The federal war room that materialized in my hotel suite over the next 72 hours would have made Pentagon strategists jealous and caused corporate merger specialists to abandon their careers from sheer inadequacy compared to this level of operational sophistication. Agent Martinez orchestrated what she diplomatically termed Operation Property Shield, the largest federal investigation into organized property fraud in American history, with coordination complexity that rivaled international treaty negotiations. My absurdly expensive hotel penthouse transformed into mission control headquarters, complete with secure communication equipment that probably cost more than luxury sports cars and enough legal documentation to supply Harvard Law School's entire curriculum. The coffee consumption alone could have powered metropolitan areas, while the assembled expertise represented the kind of professional dream team that keeps criminals awake at night contemplating career changes. Victoria Sterling arrived with her legendary reputation for systematically destroying white-collar criminals like a legal terminator with perfect courtroom fashion sense. Marcus Chen contributed forensic accounting skills capable of tracing money through offshore labyrinths that would confuse international banking regulators. Agent Martinez brought 20 years of federal investigation experience and access to databases that made Google's information gathering look like amateur hour. Phase 1 requires comprehensive evidence compilation that will survive Supreme Court appeals and whatever defense attorneys they hire using stolen property proceeds, Victoria announced with the enthusiasm of someone planning the world's most expensive and satisfying revenge operation. The evidence organization demonstrated surgical precision that would have impressed neurosurgeons. Every security video meticulously cataloged and authenticated through federal forensic laboratories. Every forged document analyzed by specialists who could detect fraud techniques invisible to naked human observation. Every financial transaction traced through networks spanning multiple states, banking systems, and jurisdictions that had never communicated before this investigation. The smell of federal determination mixed with expensive hotel coffee, and the particular electrical tension that develops when unlimited resources meet organized crime stupidity. Knowledge nugget: federal RICO prosecutions require systematic documentation proving ongoing criminal enterprise through pattern crimes committed across time periods and multiple jurisdictions. Individual criminal acts become exponentially more serious when prosecutors demonstrate organized conspiracy rather than isolated incidents. Phase 2 coordinates multi-state law enforcement response with timing precision that would impress Swiss watchmakers, Agent Martinez explained, consulting maps that resembled military campaign planning for conquering small nations. We've identified active criminal operations in Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah. Simultaneous arrests prevent evidence destruction, witness intimidation, and criminal escape to non-extradition territories. The coordination scope was absolutely staggering. FBI field offices across 6 states synchronizing arrests. State attorneys general preparing parallel prosecutions for local crimes while federal prosecutors handled interstate conspiracy charges. Asset forfeiture teams positioned to seize criminal proceeds worth millions before suspects could transfer funds to offshore accounts. Victim advocates organizing 48 affected property owners who'd never suspected their individual cases represented systematic organized crime targeting. Marcus Chen's financial analysis revealed criminal sophistication that would have impressed international money laundering consultants. They've constructed shell companies, offshore banking relationships, and asset concealment systems worthy of drug cartels, he reported with the excitement of someone discovering criminal treasure maps. However, they committed one fatal error. They maintained meticulous business records of everything. Technical knowledge nugget: Criminal enterprises frequently preserve detailed financial documentation for internal coordination purposes, which becomes comprehensive prosecution evidence when discovered by law enforcement. Organized criminals' systematic record-keeping often provides prosecutors with complete proof of illegal activities. Phase 3 involves strategic media coordination because apparently even federal prosecutions require public relations management in our modern information environment. Victoria continued with the slight amusement of someone who'd adapted to 21st century legal warfare. The media strategy was elegantly simple. Instead of defensively responding to Priscilla's manufactured victim narratives, we'd expose the systematic criminal enterprise targeting successful Americans. Every victim interview would demonstrate this represented organized crime threatening community safety rather than individual property disputes. Our secret weapon was Dr. Rebecca Torres, a forensic psychologist specializing in criminal manipulation psychology. Her analysis of systematic community manipulation would explain how intelligent, educated neighbors became unwitting accomplices in sophisticated fraud schemes. They weaponized genuine community concern against individual victims, Dr. Torres explained with academic fascination. Neighbors genuinely believe they're protecting community values while actually enabling organized criminal activity. The psychological manipulation demonstrates sophistication that could fool trained law enforcement professionals. Phase 4 emphasizes victim protection and comprehensive restitution because federal agencies take property rights seriously when criminal enterprises threaten American economic security, Agent Martinez announced with the satisfaction of someone whose career involved protecting citizens from systematic criminal exploitation. The restitution mathematics were breathtaking. $28 million in stolen properties, plus additional millions in legal expenses, emotional trauma, and federal punitive damages. Priscilla's criminal organization had accumulated sufficient proceeds to fund small municipal governments, but federal asset forfeiture would redistribute everything to legitimate victims. My role was simultaneously straightforward and absolutely crucial: serve as primary federal witness while providing unlimited resources for a comprehensive prosecution that would protect every successful American from systematic property theft disguised as community activism. Sterling, Victoria concluded with the deep satisfaction of someone approaching professional perfection, you've accidentally assembled the most comprehensive evidence file in federal property fraud prosecution history. These criminals selected the wrong target for their final performance. The planning session concluded with project management that would have impressed Fortune 100 executives. Witness preparation schedules, evidence authentication timelines, media coordination strategies, and arrest synchronization, everything orchestrated for maximum impact against criminal enterprise that had operated with complete impunity for nearly a decade. That evening, reviewing prosecution strategies while consuming coffee that cost more per cup than minimum wage hourly rates, I realized this case would transform my personal violation into systematic protection for every entrepreneur, physician, attorney, and successful American who dedicated their lives to achieving financial security. Priscilla's organization had committed the catastrophic error of targeting someone with unlimited resources, systematic documentation obsession, and apparently unlimited patience for comprehensive legal warfare. Priscilla's response to discovering she was facing federal prosecution was to launch into desperation mode that would have impressed kamikaze pilots and people who voluntarily argue with airline customer service representatives during holiday travel delays. Within 72 hours of FBI interviews becoming public knowledge, she'd mysteriously assembled what appeared to be a legal defense team, specializing in transforming hopeless criminal cases into media entertainment that would have made reality TV producers abandon their careers from professional inadequacy. The lead attorney, Bradford Thornton III, possessed a reputation for defending wealthy criminals through character assassination campaigns so sophisticated they could have been studied by international propaganda specialists. My client represents the victim of a systematic corporate conspiracy designed to criminalize legitimate community activism and property stewardship, Thornton proclaimed at a press conference that attracted more media attention than most presidential scandals. Sterling Blackwell is weaponizing unlimited financial resources to systematically destroy a vulnerable widow who courageously challenged his absolute authority over community affairs. But The sheer audacity was so breathtaking it deserved recognition from the Guinness Book of World Records under Most Creative Criminal Defense Strategy. Priscilla, facing federal charges for systematic property theft worth millions, was repositioning herself as a civil rights pioneer being persecuted by tech entrepreneurs who couldn't tolerate democratic community oversight. Her legal masterstroke involved filing comprehensive motions to suppress all evidence, claiming my security cameras violated federal privacy statutes and that FBI agents had conducted unconstitutional searches of her legitimate primary residence. The arguments were creative enough to earn advanced degrees in alternate reality jurisprudence from universities that existed only in criminal defense imagination. But the coffee in my hotel suite, which had begun tasting like victory mixed with expensive legal consultation, suddenly acquired hints of federal courtroom drama and systematic character destruction. Knowledge nugget. Federal sentencing guidelines impose significant penalty enhancements for defendants who obstruct justice, intimidate witnesses, or continue criminal activity during prosecution proceedings. Attempting to manipulate federal investigations demonstrates lack of remorse and substantially increases potential prison sentences. My counteroffensive deployed resources that most federal crime victims couldn't access in their wildest prosecution fantasies. Victoria Sterling had been anticipating exactly this type of desperate defense strategy since the investigation's inception, and her response demonstrated surgical legal precision that would have impressed Supreme Court justices and federal prosecutors with perfectionist tendencies. Mr. Thornton's assertions regarding illegal surveillance are particularly fascinating, Victoria announced to assembled media with the confidence of someone holding royal flush cards while opponents displayed jokers, considering his client systematically researched security systems before illegally occupying someone else's property to commit federal crimes she knew were being recorded. The mini-twist that obliterated Priscilla's entire defense strategy materialized when Victoria revealed email evidence proving Priscilla had proactively investigated my security infrastructure before executing her criminal invasion. Communication records showed she'd contacted the installation company while fraudulently claiming to be my authorized property manager, specifically requesting detailed information about camera locations, monitoring capabilities, and digital storage systems. Mrs. Worthington didn't accidentally encounter security surveillance, Victoria explained to reporters, frantically documenting every revelation. She systematically researched the monitoring technology, then deliberately committed federal crimes while knowing every action was being recorded in high-definition evidence. This demonstrates premeditation, criminal sophistication, and intentional federal law violation that will be absolutely crucial for sentencing considerations. But Priscilla's desperation theater was nowhere near its grand finale. Her next escalation involved engaging Pinnacle Crisis Solutions, a firm specializing in victim narrative campaigns, complete with social media manipulation, coordinated character assassination, and psychological warfare techniques that would have impressed military psychological operations specialists. Anonymous websites materialized overnight, questioning my mental stability, business ethics, personal relationships, and apparently my childhood pet ownership responsibilities. Social media accounts featuring professional photography spread carefully crafted narratives about my history of bullying vulnerable community members and pattern of using wealth to oppress disadvantaged neighbors. The digital assassination campaign was so sophisticated it included fake testimonials from former employees describing my allegedly abusive workplace behavior, manufactured evidence of unpaid contractor disputes, and even fabricated social media posts supposedly demonstrating my unstable personality and vindictive nature toward anyone challenging my authority. "They're trying to poison the jury pool before trial," Victoria observed with the analytical fascination of someone studying criminal innovation. Professional character destruction designed to transform clear federal crime evidence into wealthy bully versus vulnerable victim narratives. But their most audacious escalation involved hiring private investigators to surveil federal agents, prosecutors, and even my legal team. Apparently, Priscilla's criminal organization believed intimidating federal law enforcement would improve their legal position rather than adding obstruction of justice charges to their already overwhelming criminal liability. The surveillance attempts were so incompetent they bordered on comedic performance art. Private investigators following FBI agents using rental cars with temporary license plates, photography attempts of federal prosecutors entering courthouse buildings, even attempts to research the personal lives of federal judges assigned to the case. Agent Martinez's response demonstrated why threatening federal law enforcement represents one of criminal law's most spectacularly stupid strategic choices. Every intimidation attempt, every surveillance effort, every obstruction activity is being documented as additional federal crimes, she explained with the satisfaction of someone watching criminals systematically destroy their own defense strategies. They're essentially providing prosecutors with evidence of ongoing criminal enterprise while facing trial for organized criminal enterprise. That evening, reviewing legal strategies while consuming coffee that now tasted like inevitable victory mixed with federal justice, I realized Priscilla's desperation was actually strengthening our prosecution by demonstrating continuing criminal behavior during federal investigation. Victoria, I said, examining character assassination materials that would become additional evidence, they're making this too easy. Her response carried 20 years of legal warfare experience. Sterling, never interrupt enemies while they're systematically destroying themselves. Priscilla's final gambit demonstrated the kind of spectacular criminal stupidity that federal prosecutors frame and display in their offices as motivational artwork for challenging days when justice seems insufficiently poetic. With her trial date approaching faster than credit card bills after holiday shopping sprees, she made the decision that would elevate her from federal defendant to federal prosecution folklore legend. Instead of accepting the plea agreement that would have resulted in minimal prison time and manageable restitution, she chose to flee the country using forged documents apparently purchased from the same bargain basement service that had provided her fake property management credentials. The irony was rich enough to serve at Michelin-starred restaurants. A woman facing federal charges for systematic document forgery attempted international escape using additional forged documents. It resembled watching someone try extinguishing fires with gasoline while expressing genuine confusion about basic combustion physics. Agent Martinez's 6 a.m. phone call delivered news that would make this case required reading in federal law enforcement academies for the next 50 years. Sterling, airport security, just arrested Priscilla attempting to board an international flight to Costa Rica using a passport featuring someone else's identity with her photograph professionally laminated over the original. The escape attempt had been executed with such breathtaking incompetence it qualified as unintentional comedy performance art. She'd utilized a fake passport belonging to a deceased woman who'd been 68 when she died in 1987, while Priscilla was obviously in her early 50s. The TSA agent who discovered the fraud reportedly required medical attention from laughing so violently at the obvious deception that he strained abdominal muscles. But here's where the story transforms from criminal comedy to federal prosecution Christmas morning. The FBI search of her luxury hotel suite revealed evidence that would make experienced federal prosecutors postpone retirement plans from sheer professional euphoria. Comprehensive escape plans for establishing multiple false identities across 7 countries. Banking documentation for offshore accounts containing $2.3 million in proceeds from systematic property theft operations. Most incriminating. Meticulous business records documenting every victim, every forged document, and every criminal transaction spanning nearly a decade of organized crime. The smell of federal victory mixed with expensive hotel coffee, and the particular satisfaction that comes from watching professional criminals accidentally provide complete confessions through their own record-keeping obsessions. She maintained business documentation like she was operating a Fortune 500 corporation. Agent Martinez marveled with the wonder of someone discovering criminal archaeology treasures. Financial spreadsheets analyzing victim demographics, success rate calculations, performance evaluations for criminal accomplices, even strategic planning documents for expanding operations into additional states. The woman who'd attempted stealing my mansion through manufactured victim narratives had inadvertently provided federal prosecutors with a comprehensive operations manual for her criminal enterprise. Every scheme documented with the precision of someone preparing graduate business school applications. Knowledge nugget. Attempting to flee federal prosecution while released on bail automatically triggers obstruction of justice charges and eliminates any possibility of reduced sentencing through cooperation agreements. Flight attempts demonstrate consciousness of guilt and guarantee maximum federal penalties under sentencing guidelines. But Priscilla's escape attempt exposed something exponentially more shocking than systematic criminal record-keeping. The offshore banking accounts contained proceeds from victims federal authorities had never identified, at least 43 additional property thefts across 9 states that had never been reported to law enforcement agencies. We're documenting the largest organized property fraud enterprise in American federal law enforcement history, Agent Martinez announced with the excitement of someone who'd simultaneously solved dozens of cold cases. Her criminal operation spans over 12 years and involves estimated proceeds exceeding $35 million. The mini-twist that transformed everything from federal crime to national security concern occurred when forensic analysis of her escape documentation revealed coordination with international money laundering networks used by drug cartels and terrorism financing operations. This transcends property fraud, Agent Martinez explained with the gravity of someone whose case had achieved Department of Homeland Security classification levels. She's been utilizing terrorism financing infrastructure to launder stolen property proceeds internationally. That triggers federal terrorism statutes carrying potential life imprisonment sentences. Meanwhile, Bradford Thornton III, her previously confident attorney, was frantically attempting to distance himself from a client who just upgraded from federal property crimes to potential terrorism charges. The legal professional who'd been so righteously defending her community activism suddenly developed comprehensive amnesia about ever representing someone whose criminal activities now involved international terrorism support networks. The failed escape had triggered immediate asset forfeiture procedures that would make this the most financially devastating criminal defense in property fraud legal history. Every bank account, every property asset, every financial instrument connected to her criminal enterprise was instantly frozen, pending federal seizure and victim restitution proceedings. The most satisfying moment arrived when Pinnacle Crisis Solutions issued an emergency statement claiming they'd never knowingly represented anyone involved in international criminal terrorism activities and were absolutely shocked to discover the true scope of their former client's alleged criminal enterprise. Even her professional victim narrative specialists were abandoning their client faster than passengers evacuating the Titanic after discovering the iceberg damage assessment. Federal marshals escorting Priscilla from airport detention reported that her final statement before being transferred to federal holding facilities was, "This is entirely Sterling Blackwell's fault for selfishly refusing to let me live peacefully in his beautiful house." Peacefully. The woman who'd committed federal crimes worth tens of millions, attempted international flight using terrorism financing networks, and coordinated systematic property theft across multiple states believed she'd been residing peacefully in my stolen mansion. That evening, Victoria's phone call delivered news that would make this case foundational to American property law. Sterling, the Department of Justice, wants to utilize this prosecution as the foundation for a comprehensive federal legislation protecting property rights from organized criminal enterprises. What began as someone stealing my house had evolved into federal law that would safeguard every American property owner from systematic criminal targeting disguised as community activism. Sitting in my hotel room, finally confident about sleeping in my own mansion again, I reflected on how one woman's criminal greed had accidentally created the most comprehensive federal property crime prosecution in American legal history. The federal courthouse on sentencing day resembled something between a Supreme Court constitutional hearing and a media circus organized by people who understood that justice occasionally provides better entertainment than reality television shows featuring wealthy people behaving badly. Every seat overflowed with victims, federal agents, legal professionals, and sufficient reporters to adequately cover a presidential impeachment trial or celebrity divorce proceedings involving billionaires and international conspiracy charges. The morning air outside carried the intoxicating scent of impending justice mixed with expensive legal cologne and the particular electrical anticipation that develops when organized crime finally encounters organized law enforcement equipped with unlimited resources and systematic documentation obsessions. I arrived, accompanied by a security detail that made me feel like an accidental celebrity who'd stumbled into national security importance, walking past protesters who'd apparently been hired by someone still believing Priscilla deserved public sympathy despite facing terrorism-adjacent federal charges. Their signs reading "Justice for Property Rights Victims" suggested either impressive dedication to hopeless criminal defense or spectacular misunderstanding of who represented actual victims in this federal prosecution. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison entered the courtroom radiating the kind of judicial authority that makes career criminals consider legitimate employment opportunities and defense attorneys contemplate early retirement. Her reputation for delivering sentences that made other federal judges appear lenient had attracted legal observers from coast to coast who wanted to witness federal property crime history being written in real time. The courtroom smelled like serious legal consequences mixed with nervous perspiration and the particular tension that develops when federal justice meets organized crime with comprehensive evidence documentation. "Mrs. Worthington," Judge Morrison announced with judicial gravity capable of silencing natural disasters and political conventions, "you stand convicted of 52 federal charges including racketeering conspiracy, systematic property fraud, international money laundering, sophisticated document forgery, and coordination with terrorism financing networks." The complete conviction recitation required nearly 4 minutes, during which Priscilla sat wearing federal detention clothing that clashed dramatically with her previous designer wardrobe empire. Her hair, no longer professionally maintained, framed a face suggesting federal prison facilities don't provide luxury spa services, confidence coaching, or victim narrative consultation. Federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh presented the government's case with surgical precision that would have impressed neurosurgeons and Supreme Court justices. "Your Honor, Mrs. Worthington orchestrated the largest organized property fraud enterprise in American federal law enforcement history, systematically targeting successful citizens and stealing over $42 million across 15 years of criminal operations." The evidence presentation was comprehensive enough to serve as graduate-level education in federal criminal prosecution, financial flowcharts displaying international money laundering networks that would have impressed drug cartel accountants, victim testimonials from 51 affected property owners describing systematic targeting and community manipulation, expert psychological analysis of criminal manipulation techniques sophisticated enough to fool trained law enforcement professionals, security footage showing Priscilla's methodical criminal activities played on massive courtroom screens, while federal marshals maintained order among spectators, who audibly gasped at the scope of criminal sophistication disguised as suburban community activism. The defendants specifically selected successful Americans because their professional achievements made them premium targets for systematic property theft. Prosecutor Walsh continued with the confidence of someone presenting cases to international criminal courts. She weaponized legitimate community concern against individual property owners, transforming genuine neighborly spirit into criminal conspiracy through manufactured emergency narratives. The moment that had drawn national media attention and would influence federal sentencing guidelines for decades arrived when Judge Morrison called me to provide victim impact testimony that would establish legal precedent for future organized property crime prosecutions. "Mr. Blackwell, please describe how this criminal enterprise affected not merely your individual property, but broader American concepts of security, community trust, and the relationship between success and vulnerability." I approached the witness stand, understanding my words would influence federal policy protecting every successful American who dedicated their careers to achieving financial security, only to discover their accomplishments made them targets for criminals who transformed achievement into vulnerability. "Your Honor, this prosecution transcends recovering my stolen mansion," I began, maintaining direct eye contact with Priscilla, who appeared to be experiencing her first sustained contact with observable reality in several years. "This case protects every entrepreneur, physician, attorney, military veteran, and successful American from systematic criminal targeting disguised as community protection." The courtroom achieved cathedral silence except for reporters' pens documenting statements that would become federal case law precedent and law enforcement training materials. "Mrs. Worthington didn't merely steal my property. She violated the fundamental American principle that professional success should provide security rather than criminal targeting opportunities. Her network systematically researched my business achievements and weaponized my accomplishments against me through manufactured community crisis narratives. The mic drop moment that would be quoted in federal law enforcement academies and property rights legislation arrived with my closing statement. Wealth and professional success made me an attractive target for this criminal enterprise, but those identical advantages provided me with resources to fight back that most victims simply cannot access. Every American citizen deserves identical protection from organized property crime, regardless of their financial resources or ability to hire comprehensive legal representation. This federal prosecution isn't about one wealthy individual recovering his mansion. It's about ensuring that success in America provides security rather than systematic criminal exploitation opportunities. The spontaneous applause erupted like a emotional volcano, lasting nearly 6 minutes while cameras captured federal agents, prosecutors, victims, and legal observers rising to acknowledge the broader constitutional significance of systematic property crime prosecution and community protection. Judge Morrison's sentencing delivered justice with Old Testament satisfaction. Mrs. Worthington, you are sentenced to 52 years in federal prison without parole possibility, ordered to pay $68 million in comprehensive victim restitution, including punitive damages, and permanently prohibited from any property-related business activities or community governance positions. Priscilla's final words before federal marshals escorted her to begin her extensive federal incarceration revealed her continued psychological separation from reality. This represents systematic discrimination against legitimate community activism. My response became the newspaper quote printed across America as inspiration for organized crime victims. No, ma'am. This is what happens when criminals target Americans who possess both the resources and determination to fight back systematically. 6 months later, I was finally sleeping in my own mansion again, and let me tell you, coffee tastes exponentially better when brewed in a kitchen that actually belongs to you, rather than some ridiculously overpriced hotel that charges more per night than most people's annual vacation budgets combined with their streaming service subscriptions. Priscilla began serving her 52-year federal sentence at a correctional facility that definitely didn't offer the luxury amenities, designer bathrobes, or victim narrative coaching she'd grown accustomed to during her criminal career. Her criminal network accomplices received sentences ranging from 8 to 25 years, with most cooperating so enthusiastically with federal authorities that they practically provided prosecutors with detailed instruction manuals for identifying similar organized crime operations. The federal asset forfeiture program distributed $68 million to victim families across 11 states, transforming Priscilla's systematically stolen criminal proceeds into comprehensive restitution that provided both financial healing and restored faith in American justice for people whose life savings had been methodically stolen through manufactured community emergency theater. But the genuine victory transcended individual financial recovery and entered the realm of constitutional protection for every successful American. The Sterling Blackwell Property Protection Act became federal law with bipartisan congressional support, establishing comprehensive safeguards for American property owners against organized criminal enterprises that disguise systematic theft as community activism and neighborly concern. The legislation included mandatory federal investigation triggers for systematic property targeting patterns, dramatically enhanced penalties for criminals who weaponize community spirit against individual Americans, and comprehensive victim assistance programs ensuring no citizen lacks resources to fight organized property crime regardless of their financial circumstances. The FBI's Operation Property Shield evolved into a permanent federal task force coordinating seamlessly with state and local law enforcement to identify and prosecute organized property fraud before criminals could establish operational foundations in vulnerable communities. Agent Martinez became the National Task Force Director, specializing in protecting successful Americans from systematic criminal targeting disguised as social justice initiatives. Final knowledge nugget. Federal property crime legislation now mandates comprehensive background checks for all HOA officials, complete financial transparency for community governance positions, and systematic reporting requirements for targeting patterns. When communities actively protect individual property rights, they simultaneously protect everyone's financial security and constitutional freedoms. My paranoid security footage became required viewing in federal law enforcement training academies nationwide, demonstrating how systematic documentation can transform individual criminal victimization into comprehensive federal prosecution that protects entire communities from organized crime infiltration. The Willowbrook Estates community implemented what residents now proudly call the Blackwell Community Protection Standards: comprehensive background verification for all community officials, mandatory financial transparency for governance positions, and systematic protection protocols preventing future criminal infiltration. Property values increased 23% once prospective buyers realized they were investing in a community that had successfully identified, prosecuted, and permanently eliminated sophisticated organized crime. Victoria Sterling established the Constitutional Property Rights Defense Foundation, using her substantial legal fees from this case, providing completely free legal representation for Americans facing systematic property targeting who lack resources for comprehensive criminal defense. The foundation has already successfully protected 68 families from similar organized crime operations across 15 states. But perhaps the most personally satisfying transformation was discovering that fighting organized crime had taught me that wealth and professional success carry moral responsibilities, extending far beyond personal achievement and luxury mansion ownership. I established the American Property Security Initiative, a comprehensive foundation providing education, legal assistance, and community protection resources, ensuring no successful American becomes a criminal target simply because their achievements make them attractive to systematic predators who exploit success as vulnerability. The annual Property Rights and Community Protection Summit brings together federal law enforcement professionals, constitutional attorneys, and community leaders to share advanced strategies for identifying and preventing organized crime targeting of successful Americans. This year's keynote speaker was Agent Martinez, who reported that systematic property crime prosecutions had increased 420% since our case established definitive federal precedent. Every morning, I still savor coffee on my mansion's expansive deck while watching sunrise paint the landscape in colors that remind me why private property rights represent the bedrock foundation of American constitutional freedom. The difference is that now I fully understand both the responsibility that accompanies resources and the critical importance of using personal success to protect fellow Americans from systematic criminal exploitation. The security system that accidentally captured Priscilla's criminal enterprise has been upgraded to include community-wide coordination monitoring, ensuring Willowbrook Estates serves as a national model for protecting American neighborhoods from organized criminal infiltration while maintaining the community spirit that makes suburban life genuinely appealing. 2 years later, my mansion feels like home again rather than a federal crime scene, and I've learned that sometimes the most effective way to protect your own constitutional property rights is ensuring every American enjoys identical protections regardless of their financial resources, legal expertise, or ability to hire unlimited criminal defense representation. If you've survived property theft, systematic HOA harassment, or organized targeting by people abusing community authority positions, share your story in the comments below. American property protection requires active community awareness and mutual support among citizens who understand our constitutional rights and responsibilities. Subscribe for more stories where systematic documentation, unlimited legal resources, and federal cooperation protect constitutional freedoms, while proving that organized crime cannot survive comprehensive investigation by Americans who absolutely refuse to be intimidated by criminal enterprises. Next week, city inspector tried to condemn combat veterans' machine shop, didn't know he's the federal safety expert who actually wrote the inspection standards manual. Sometimes protecting your own property means protecting every American's constitutional right to security, community, and the fundamental promise that success provides safety rather than systematic criminal targeting opportunities.